Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I don't have dry hair, so there's no hat today. I read more of that book, maybe an hour more of that book. I had 4.5 hours left. I read 45 minutes more of this book. Okay, so in that 45 minutes, I had 4 pages. I now have 13. I have I have taken 9 fucking pages of notes in 45 minutes. So, what I didn't expect out of this book, right, is I didn't expect it to go over changing behavioral patterns, and that's something that I am working to do. That was like the goal that I set whenever I decided I was going to do the therapy thing and get started on all this, right? Was the behavioral changes. Okay? Now, I got really fucking excited whenever the chapter came up about changing behaviors and understanding where they came from and how to break patterns and relearn new ones. Okay, I got really fucking excited about this. So, uh, let's start with pain. Okay, we're gonna delve into self-talk a little bit because this makes sense to me. This is the self-talk is kind of where these negative behaviors can come from because negative self-talk can reinforce a negative bias against yourself and then turn into a negative core belief about yourself, and that can cause a whole lot of problems in your behavior. Um, but let's start with pain. Now, pain never changes, right? Like, let's use the hot stove as an example, right? You touch it and it burns the shit out of you, right? Really hurts. Hurts a lot. That pain never changes anytime you touch that stove. Like, the pain remains the same unless your nerves are dead, I guess. But it remains the same. Your relationship with that pain changes. Okay, so the first time that you ever touch a hot stove, you don't know that that hot stove is going to hurt, right? You have no idea because it's your first time ever experiencing that kind of pain and ever going up to a hot stove like, oh, let me touch that. After you touch it for the first time and you feel that burning sensation in your hand or wherever you touched it, and it becomes excruciating pain, then that is now you relate that hot stove with a really negative feeling in your body, right? So the relationship with that pain has now changed. But anytime that you go and touch the hot stove, the pain never changes, okay? So I forget who they referenced in this book about who came up with the idea of this, but they defined two different types of pain. One of them being dirty pain and one of them being clean pain. Dirty pain is the pain of avoidance, denial, and blame. That's the idea of dirty pain. The idea of clean pain is pain that mends and builds capacity to grow, meaning you are able to take the pain that you're feeling and make it work for you and allow yourself to grow in a way that maybe you couldn't before. I thought that was a really interesting idea. I kind of like the sound of that. Anyway, so for changing behavior patterns, right? We It kind of goes into developing new habits and breaking the old ones, right? And you're probably thinking the exact same thing that I thought whenever I heard habit formation was the term that they used. But whenever I heard that, my initial thought was, what does habit have to do with any of this? But it makes total fucking sense. Okay. Or I've tried to make new habits and I haven't gotten any fucking where. Okay? So, what we're going to do in order to make these behavioral changes happen is we have to put space between our internal reaction and our outward response. Meaning, there's a quote here from this book, and it says, "You are not responsible for your first thought. You are responsible for your second thought and your first behavior." So, okay, let's say, hypothetical situation. Somebody says some really disrespectful shit to you, okay? Somebody just decides they're going to be an asshole, right? And they're just going to say some really disrespectful shit. Pick a line, I don't care. And they get that initial what the fuck? You know, like that's what initially forms in your mind is that excuse me. Sure. That's what initially forms in your mind is that what the fuck? But let's say you're on a journey to be a better person in terms of your reactions and maybe not allow people such as this to get under your skin, okay? If you're going to having that first initial what the fuck thought and having that reaction of I'm gonna hurt your feelings or maybe I'm gonna hit this guy or whatever it is, that's your first initial thought and you're not responsible for that one. You are responsible for choosing not to respond to that thought and being in control of your next thought. So maybe instead of what can I do to get back at this person, you think, you know, honestly, this isn't worth my time. I'm not going to stoop to this kind of level, right? And then you can just walk the fuck away. Unfortunately, there's a lot of disrespectful shit said in the workplace when it comes from people of higher positions that think very highly of themselves. They will say some very smart ass shit to you. And your initial thought every single time is going to be that what the fuck, right? Every single time. But if you give yourself the extra half second it takes to come up with a second thought, then you can then allow yourself the space that it takes to choose how to respond. And if, especially in a workplace, you just kind of have to walk the fuck away. Grit your teeth, walk the fuck away, right? As much as that sucks, that's kind of what you have to do. So, after enough practice at doing this, new habits we develop in behavior will become automatic. So your initial thought that you respond to now is an automatic thought. That is a behavioral groove that your brain has created because there are shortcuts in the brain now, right? Your brain has created this very short pathway to get to an end result because of other experiences and situations. Your brain is threat assessing, kind of, and because it's kind of similar to according to your brain, you're almost always going to react in the same way unless you can catch that and practice ignoring the first thought and then controlling the second thought and your outward response to what just happened, right? I feel like that's really important in an argument in a relationship, by the way. That's the thought that sparked in my mind whenever I heard this was if you're in a relationship and you get into an argument, you can't say the first shit that comes to your head because almost every time your first thought is your dumbest one. Okay. Now, it will take effort to do this at first because we have to be conscious of our thoughts. when you're dealing with behavior patterns and your initial thoughts and initial reactions, your brain has already created a groove, a shortcut to follow, right? It's already created that. That's why you have to be conscious. You have to choose to be conscious of your initial thought, because if you're conscious of that, then you can choose not to respond to that and then come up with a better response as opposed to just being reactionary. Okay? I kind of already said this. My note says we have to recognize that our initial thought as bullshit and choose not to respond to it. Patterns of initial thoughts can impact our intermediate thoughts and our core beliefs in a negative way. Let's get into that. Negative core beliefs are negative I statements that include I am, I can, I can't, right? The example that they used was I can't make a mistake at work, right? I can't make mistakes at work. Well, why is that? Because if I make mistakes at work, then I'm going to get fired. And what would that mean if that happened? Well, if I get fired, then I can't pay my bills and I end up homeless. Okay, well, what's the worst that could happen with that? Then that means that I am now worthless and I can't do anything right. Okay, you see how that kind of leads down a whole path of negative self-talk, right? Okay. So there are 3 categories to these negative core beliefs. Okay, there is helplessness, unlovability, and worthlessness, and the work example is what they gave. I didn't take the time to come up with my own example, but that was a good one to me. If you are feeling absolutely worthless, like in your soul, that's your core belief, is you're a worthless person or an unlovable person, there is nothing to lose or to gain in the world for you. Okay? Behaviors that stem from these mindsets can be very chaotic and they can be punishing, whether that be for you or the people around you. It doesn't matter. It's negative. Okay, it's coming from a place of negativity and chaos to begin with. That behavior is only going to then beget negativity and chaos. So we must train ourselves to respond in ways that are proactive instead of reactive, meaning giving yourself that extra half second to think about something before you decide to respond to it. Right? Because in negative behaviors, in those patterns that we've created due to negative situations that we've dealt with before, we're not able to discern certain situations from the present one, right? And when we are in that reactionary state, we just say the first shit that comes to our mind. It could be something off the wall and doesn't even make any fucking sense, okay? It can make absolute no sense. And when we are doing this, that can cause a whole lot of problems, whether that be at work, in your relationships, in your friendships, whatever. It can cause a whole lot of problems. That's what we're trying to avoid. No matter how smart you are as a person, your brain can be really fucking stupid. Okay? As hard as that may be to hear, it's the truth. Okay? I would know. I don't consider myself a smart person, but I have felt really fucking stupid for a lot of shit that I have said or a lot of things that I've done due to behaviors and shortcuts that my brain has created. I have developed patterns that are very unhealthy in terms of behavior when it comes to certain aspects of my life, and they've become very problematic in a lot of ways. We must know our capacity to prevent misfiring so that we can align our actions with our beliefs. Now, At your core, most people know who they are. They know that they are not worthless. They have goals. They have some semblance of love for themselves, right? In at your core, generally, I would think. There are a couple of core beliefs that I personally need to uproot and get the fuck rid of because I was raised in really shitty environments and I was told my entire life I'm not going to be worth a fuck in a lot of different ways. I was often the butt of the joke when it came to school peers. I was often bullied at home by the one person that I should have been able to trust with my safety, right? I was a fucking child. You would think that your child can trust you with your safety being a parent, but sometimes that's just not the case. So I have to uproot this belief that I don't deserve any real love. I have to uproot that I am worthless, and I have to uproot that I'm not going to do anything with my life, because none of those things are actually true. Like, none of them. Everybody deserves real love. Everybody deserves to be able to do what they want with their lives and be happy with that. And every single person deserves to feel valuable, right? Especially to yourself. If you believe that you're invaluable, then you're going to believe that nobody thinks you're valuable. I've experienced that. I would know. Okay, so we're gonna kind of go over the brief description that I got about cognitive behavior therapy, and I'm really excited about this because this is something that my therapist does. I haven't gotten there yet. My session still isn't until next week, but this is something that my therapist does. Now, cognitive behavior therapy goes over biases and behaviors that are developed by numerous things, including automatic thoughts. Automatic thoughts are dumb, off-the-wall shit our brains say that we may not believe, but will be reinforced if it comes up often enough, which will make it a core belief. Negative self-talk is a great example of this. I hate myself. I'm not worth a shit. I'm unlovable. That kind of thing, right? And that becomes a problem in terms of how we are viewing the world and ourselves and how we view other people, right? Negative core beliefs become foundational in mental health struggles. And unwanted behavior patterns are based on the beliefs that we hold. Creating change means that we are making these beliefs and biases conscious in order to analyze and challenge them. I am unlovable. Are you really unlovable, or do you just feel that way because someone told you that and you've reinforced it in your brain? Okay. The brain always errs on the side of caution, right? Always. And it doesn't always do a great job of threat assessment. If we've been through traumatic experiences, and that can be anything, traumatic experiences can be any event that surpasses our ability to cope with. Okay? If we have dealt with something like this, that fight or flight or freeze even response, it can be turned on for prolonged periods, especially if we're not healing and coming to resolution about that traumatic experience. So, for me personally, I was in survival mode for a very long time. A very long time. Because of the environments that I was forced to be in and the environments that I got used to because I wanted to be fucked up and not feel whatever it is that I was feeling. Now, in those environments, I faced a lot of threats, whether that be legal trouble or physical violence or even just straight up like bullying. Okay. There was a lot of that through an extended time period in my life, whether that would be from the environments that I was forced to be in or the environments that I got used to so I could get high. Okay. So in changing the behavioral pattern, I also have to heal from the experiences that I went through during this time period, because if I don't do that, then trying to change the behavior pattern may as well be pointless, okay? Because the survival mode doesn't turn off if I am constantly reliving trauma. Especially thinking that any situation that I have been in or any present situation that I am currently living, I am relating to a traumatic experience that I've already had, and my brain has made that shortcut. We've seen this before, we know how this goes, and that fight, flight, or freeze response comes up, right? So to kind of go into this, your brain is interpreting a whole lot of raw data whenever you're in a response like this, like a survival response. And they're not conscious thoughts, they're not conscious assumptions. They are, the only thing that you're conscious of is the conclusion that your brain came to whenever you got to the end of that situation, after the threat has been quote unquote dealt with, right? If you view the world through the lens of unhealed trauma, you're more than likely to view present situations as if you're reliving past trauma. The brain makes more assumptions that we may not even be aware of or maybe don't want to admit. You're more than likely to remember emotional experience of an event rather than the material facts of what actually happened. Formative experiences have a lot to do with this. If you grew up in an environment, anything like I did, or even a worse one, you were abused as a child, or you were just raised in a toxic environment, you know, whatever it was, those formative experiences will carry into adulthood if you're not exposed to other environments, because your brain doesn't know that there's another option for how life can be. So like, say you grow up getting your ass beat all the time for whatever reason, you're going to go into life as an adult thinking you're going to get your ass beat all the time if nothing ever changes as a child, right? That becomes a formative experience. And if your brain is not allowed to see other options for how life can be, then you're always going to be in that traumatic experience. So I thought that was really interesting stuff. This is crazy shit. This is making a whole lot of sense to me. I'm learning things about myself and why certain things are happening while I'm listening to a fucking audiobook. That's insane to me. Anyway, so that's what I have for that one. If we're going to change behaviors, we first have to look within and uproot whatever negative core beliefs we have about ourselves or maybe even the world, right? Because that's where those patterns come from. When we can uproot that stuff and we can make it a thing where we're able to give ourselves space to respond in a better way whenever we're trying to break out of this survival mode, then we can then start changing patterns. And when we're able to do that and we're able to improve behavioral patterns, it becomes a whole lot easier to maintain relationships and make them healthy ones even. You know what I mean? Pick whatever kind of relationship you want. It applies across the board. But that's the whole thing. If especially if you struggle to make friends, that is something that you might need to look into. Um, I'll tell you what, doing this stuff is insane to me. I've never gone this in depth with anything like this before. And learning this stuff and connecting the dots of, well, that might be why I do this, and then going into that a little deeper to figure out that's exactly why I do that is insane to me. And I'm fucking loving it. I feel like I'm getting the tools before I even start therapy to start the work on myself, and that's what I wanted to begin with. And by the way, I still have 3 hours and 46 minutes left in this book. And I have 14 I have 13 pages of notes. That's insane to me. Anyway, that's all I have for that one. I think that is very useful information to have if you're going to try to attempt to change negative behavior patterns. Um, Learn the why and maybe the negative core belief behind it. If there is one, if there isn't one, then you need to look for the traumatic experience behind it that enforces whatever negative self-talk you have going on in your brain. So then you can break the negative behavior pattern. Because that's really important whenever you're trying to take accountability and do the work to do better. So that's all I have for that one. I hope you're having a great day. I'll see you in the next one.